A $300 million deal is dying on the table in the city's most exclusive restaurant. The executives are sweating their smiles as fake as the designer watches on their wrists. Across from them sits Mr. Satoshi Takahashi, a Japanese millionaire who holds the city's manufacturing future in his silent hands. He hasn't spoken a word they can understand all night. As the insults whispered in English begin to fly, the deal turns to ash. But in the corner, a waitress named Anna holding a tray of empty glasses understands every single word, and she's about to change everything. The Cypress Room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress of new money and old power. Its windows, stretching 2 stories high, overlooked a city skyline that glittered like a spilled jewelry box. Inside, the only sounds were the discreet clink of heavy silver on porcelain and the murmuring tide of voices discussing mergers, acquisitions, and the failings of their competitors. In private dining room. However, the silence was a sickness. 3 men sat on one side of a massive mahogany table. The man at the center was Richard Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Industries. He was a man carved from polished granite with a booming voice that was, for the first time in recent memory, completely useless. To his left sat Tom Harrington, his sycophantic VP of Operations, and to his right, Mark Jensen, a junior analyst who looked like he might vibrate out of his suit. On the other side alone sat Mr. Satoshi Takahashi. Takahashi was the ghost at the feast. He was older, perhaps 60, with a perfectly tailored suit that was understated to the point of invisibility. He had not touched his $200 plate of seared A5 Wagyu. He had not sipped his $800 bottle of Cabernet. He just sat, his hands folded, his expression one of serene, impenetrable calm. The deal was for a new microchip fabrication plant. It meant 3,000 local jobs and a $300 million injection into the local economy. For Blackwell, it meant his face on the cover of Forbes. For Takahashi, it was apparently just a Tuesday. The problem, the catastrophic room-ending problem, was the translator. His flight from Chicago. Blackwell hissed, his face a mask of strained politeness, is still grounded. Mechanical failure. They're telling me 2 more hours, at least. The app, Richard, Tom Harrington suggested weakly, gesturing to the smartphone on the table. We tried the app, Tom, Blackwell snapped. He asked for the restroom, and it told him the honor of the small room is waiting. He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. The app is useless. Anna Riley stood in the corner by the service station, her back rigid. She was invisible, a function of the room, like the dim lighting or the heavy linen. This was her second double shift this week. Rent was due on Friday. Her 2008 sedan had developed a clicking sound that sounded suspiciously like a failing transmission. She needed the tip from this table. A table this expensive with this much alcohol should have netted her $400. But the table wasn't drinking. They were stewing. Anna watched Blackwell, a man she'd seen in the local business journals. He oozed a toxic confidence, the kind of man who had never been told no. He was leaning in, speaking slowly and loudly, as if Mr. Takahashi were a child. We are offering you the best tax incentives in the state. Mr. Takahashi simply blinked his gaze, unfaltering. Blackwell threw his napkin down. This is a nightmare, an absolute joke. He turned to Tom, believing the distance and the volume of the ventilation system provided privacy. He just sits there, Tom, like a stone Buddha. Does he even understand basic English? What a waste of a perfectly good steak. Tom Harrington, the sycophant, let out a nervous snort of laughter. "I know, boss. It's like talking to a wall." Mark Jensen, the junior, wisely said nothing, his eyes wide with terror. From the corner, Anna flinched. She saw Mr. Takahashi's posture change. It was almost imperceptible. A slight stiffening of the spine. His eyes, which had been calm, hardened. He had not understood the words, perhaps, but he had understood the tone. He had understood the laughter. He reached for his briefcase on the floor beside him. He slowly placed his own unused napkin on the table. Anna recognized the gesture. In the culture, she knew this was the end. This was the equivalent of flipping the table and walking out. The deal wasn't just dying. Blackwell had just murdered it. Blackwell, seeing the motion, panicked. No, wait, Matt! Wait!" he shouted, butchering the one word he clearly knew. Mr. Takahashi stood up, and Anna moved. It wasn't a decision. It was an impulse born of desperation and a sudden white-hot flash of anger. Her manager Charles would fire her on the spot. But she couldn't stand there and watch this train wreck. She couldn't watch these arrogant men destroy this opportunity because they were too ignorant to show basic respect. "Riley, get back to your station," Charles hissed from the doorway. Anna ignored him. She stepped out of the shadows and walked directly to the table. Blackwell, Tom, and Mark stared at her dumbfounded. She stopped a respectful 5 feet from Mr. Takahashi. She did not look him in the eye. She bowed not a deep, subservient bow, but a short, crisp inclination of the head, a bow of mutual respect. Then, in a voice that was clear, steady, and perfectly fluent, she began to speak in Japanese. The silence that followed was no longer a sickness. It was a vacuum. Blackwell's jaw hung open. Tom Harrington looked like he'd been struck by lightning, Mr. Musto. Satoshi Takahashi, the stone Buddha, froze. He slowly turned his head. He looked at Anna, really looked at her for the first time. The shock on his face was profound. He replied with a short, sharp question in his own language. Anna listened, nodded, and replied. Takahashi stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he sat back down. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. Blackwell, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple, finally found his voice. "What in the hell is going on here?" "Anna." Riley turned to him, her expression as neutral as a pane of glass. "Mr. Takahashi," she said, her voice betraying no emotion, "has just accepted my apology for your conduct. He says he is willing to stay, if I will join the dinner and translate. He would like to know, Mr. Blackwell, if you are prepared to begin the meeting in earnest, or if you would prefer he call his car." Anna Riley was not a waitress. Not really. She was a ghost haunting the ruins of a life that should have been hers. To the staff at the Cypress Room, she was just Anna. Quiet, efficient, always picking up extra shifts. They knew she was overqualified. You could tell by the way she spoke, by the weary intelligence in her eyes. But in a city built on service and hospitality, you didn't ask questions. Everyone had a story. Anna's story began 20 years earlier and 5,000 miles away in a small, meticulously clean house in Kyoto, Japan. Her father, Robert Riley, was a brilliant software engineer. He hadn't just been brilliant. He'd been a visionary. In the late 1990s, when green tech was just a buzzword, he had designed a revolutionary logistics program that could reduce a shipping corporation's carbon footprint by almost 30%. An enormous Japanese conglomerate, Kyoto Nexus, had seen his potential. They had moved the entire Riley family. Robert, his wife, and 9-year-old Anna to Kyoto, setting them up in a beautiful home and giving Robert his own lab. For 5 years, it was an idyllic life. Anna, bright and immersive, didn't just learn Japanese. She absorbed it. She spoke it on the playground before she spoke it in the classroom. She learned the nuances, the honorifics, the subtle language of respect, and the equally subtle language of disdain. She learned that what wasn't said was often more important than what was. Her father, meanwhile, flourished. He built his program. He refined it. He integrated it with the Kyoto Nexus mainframe. He trusted his partners. He believed in the mission. The betrayal, when it came, was not a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet, polite, systematic execution. It happened in a boardroom, not unlike the one at the Cypress Room. Anna, then 14, had waited in the lobby. Her father had gone in, smiling, expecting to sign the final rollout contract. He came out 3 hours later, his face the color of ash. They had found a loophole, a single ambiguous clause in his 400-page contract. His program, his life's work, was now the sole property of Kyoto Nexus. They thanked him for his service. They offered him a generous severance and a plane ticket home. Robert Riley fought it. He drained his savings hiring Japanese lawyers who politely explained that while the action was regrettable, it was not illegal. He had been, in the simplest terms, outmaneuvered. The Rileys returned to America not as triumphant expats, but as failures. The shame broke her father. Robert Riley, the visionary, went from designing revolutionary algorithms to working a mid-level IT job at a community college, a quiet man who flinched at loud noises. Anna's college fund, which had been tied up in her father's company stock, was gone. Her fluency in Japanese, once a source of pride, became a scar. It was the language of her childhood happiness and the language of her family's destruction. She'd worked her way through state college, earning a business degree, but graduated with a mountain of debt into a recession. The only job that paid the bills that covered her rent and helped her parents with their mortgage was high-end service. So here she was, Anna Riley, the girl who had once chatted with monks in Kyoto temples, now wearing a black apron and polyester blend trousers, her dreams reduced to the hope of a 22% tip. When she had stepped forward, it wasn't just to save her tip. It was the ghost of that 14-year-old girl in the Kyoto Nexus lobby. It was the sudden visceral need to see the men who looked like her father's destroyers fail. And it was the sight of Mr. Takahashi, a man who, unlike her father, was not naive, a man who understood the game. She was terrified. She was shaking. But as she sat down in the plush leather chair, the chair Mark Jensen, the junior, had scrambled to vacate for her, she felt something she hadn't felt in a decade. She felt dangerous. "Right," Blackwell blustered, trying to regain control. He smoothed his tie. "Right. Good. Excellent. Anna, you've been with us at the Cypress for, what, a year?" 18 months, sir," Anna said. Her voice was pure ice. "Wonderful. Well, good initiative." He turned to Takahashi, his false smile back in place. "Please, tell Mr. Takahashi that we are so sorry for the translator's delay. We are very eager to present our proposal." Anna turned to Mr. Takahashi. She bowed her head slightly. She spoke in calm, formal Japanese. The room watched as Mr. Takahashi listened. His expression was unreadable. He replied, his voice soft but firm. Anna turned back to Blackwell. "Mr. Takahashi acknowledges your apology. He says he is more concerned by the conduct of your associates than the absence of his translator. He asks if it is common practice at Blackwell Industries to mock a guest you believe to be ignorant. Tom Harrington's face went white. Blackwell's turned from purple to a mottled red. That was a private... It was a misunderstanding, Blackwell stammered. Shall I translate that as, yes, it is common practice? Anna asked, her eyebrow raised just a fraction. No. Blackwell slammed his hand on the table, making the water glasses jump. You tell him it was a moment of levity, a joke, lost in translation. Tell him that... Anna turned to Mr. Takahashi and spoke again. She did not translate Blackwell's words. She couldn't. A direct translation of a joke would be the final unforgivable insult. Instead, she said in Japanese, Mr. Blackwell is a man of great passion. He becomes frustrated when he feels he cannot adequately express his deep respect for you and your organization. He fears he has made a grave error and humbly asks for your indulgence to begin anew. Mr. Takahashi studied Anna. He knew what she was doing. She wasn't just translating. She was mediating. She was saving Blackwell from himself. A tiny, almost invisible smile touched the corner of Mr. Takahashi's mouth. He gave a short, sharp nod. Good, Blackwell said, mistaking the nod as forgiveness. Now let's get to it. Mark the presentation. Mark Jensen fumbled with a laptop, connecting it to the large screen on the wall. A corporate blue PowerPoint slide lit up the room. Anna, Blackwell commanded, tell him this is the future. Tell him this is the most aggressive, most profitable partnership he will find in North America. Anna took a deep breath. The performance was about to begin. Miss Blackwell, she said, without looking at him. If you want this deal, you will stop speaking in headlines. You will stop shouting. You will address me and I will address him. He is not a child. He is a guest. And right now you are a very poor host. Please, begin. Blackwell looked as if she had slapped him. But he was trapped. The $300 million deal was sitting in a waitress's lap. Fine, he ground out. Fine. Ask him, what are his primary concerns about the American market? Anna nodded, turned to Mr. Takahashi, and began the real conversation. The room and her entire life had just pivoted on its axis. The dynamic of the room had been irrevocably altered. The power had not just shifted. It had evaporated from one side of the table and reappeared on the other, consolidated in the unlikely figure of Anna Riley. She was no longer a waitress. She was a conduit, a gatekeeper. Blackwell, Tom, and Mark now watched her with a mixture of raw fury and terrified dependence. Mr. Takahashi, on the other hand, addressed her with a focused, courteous respect. He had, in effect, cut the three executives out of the conversation. He was now having a business meeting directly with Anna. Mr. Blackwell's presentation, Anna translated as Mark Jensen clicked nervously through slides filled with pie charts and upward trending graphs, is focused entirely on Q4 projections and market share capture. Mr. Takahashi would like to know what provisions have been made for the long-term well-being of the 3,000 employees you plan to hire. Blackwell scoffed. Well-being? We'll offer a competitive benefits package. The well-being is the job. Tell him the projections for this plant are staggering. We're guaranteeing a 28% return on investment within 3 years. Anna filtered this. She removed the arrogance, the dismissive scoff. She translated, Blackwell Industries is confident in the financial robustness of the project. He assures you the positions will be competitive. However, Mr. Takahashi, he did not directly answer your question. My impression is that long-term employee welfare is not his primary metric for success. Mr. Takahashi nodded slowly. He spoke again, his voice calm and methodical. "Mr. Takahashi," Anna said, turning back to Blackwell, "understands that you are a man focused on numbers. He is too. He would like to see the environmental impact report for the proposed site." Mark Jensen paled. The environmental report. We're still finalizing that," Tom Harrington cut in. "It's a formality. The EPA regulations are all being met. Tell him it's handled." Anna translated. "Mr. Takahashi notes your hesitation. He says that in his experience, an environmental report is never a formality. He says that building a factory is like planting a tree. One does not plant a sick tree and expect healthy fruit. He is concerned that you view the land and the local community as disposable assets." "That is absolutely not true," Blackwell boomed. "We are bringing jobs. We are a boon to this community. You tell him that? Tell him he's insulting us." "I will not translate that, Mr. Blackwell," Anna said, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "You are missing the point. He is not accusing you. He is testing you. He is not asking about profits. He is asking about philosophy. He is trying to find out if you are a partner or just a vendor." "What's the difference?" Tom Harrington muttered. Mr. Takahashi heard the mutter and asked Anna what was said. Anna translated the question faithfully. He asks, "What is the difference between a partner and a vendor?" Takahashi smiled. It was a cold, thin smile. He spoke at length. "Mr. Takahashi says," Anna translated, her eyes locked on Blackwell, "that a vendor is someone you use. You pay them to provide a service, and when you can find a cheaper vendor, you discard the old one. A partner is someone you build with. You both hold the weight. You both share the risk, and you both celebrate the harvest, even if that harvest takes 20 years to ripen." He says your proposal feels like a vendor's. You are offering him a chance to spend money. You are not offering him a chance to build a legacy. Blackwell was finally truly speechless. He was a shark in a tank, and he had just been asked to describe the sky. He had no frame of reference for this. Legacy. 20 years. He was focused on the next quarter. He was losing. He knew it, and he knew she knew it. "This is ridiculous," Blackwell finally said, his voice low. This philosophy. It's not how American business works. We're capitalists. We're here to make money. He knows that. This is just a negotiating tactic. He's trying to lowball the valuation." He leaned in, his eyes narrowed into slits. "Anna, I'm done playing this game. You tell him word for word. We have another investor, a German firm. They are very interested. If he is not prepared to sign a letter of intent tonight based on the numbers we've provided, then this dinner is over. We will move on." It was a bluff, a desperate, clumsy, high-stakes bluff. The German firm was a rumor, nothing more. Anna looked at Blackwell, then at the two pale, silent men beside him. She saw the desperation. She saw the lie. She turned to Mr. Takahashi. She knew that to translate this threat verbatim would be a disaster. It was the vendor language Blackwell had just been warned about. It was the talk of a man who builds nothing, who only seeks to exploit. But she also knew Blackwell was at his limit. If she didn't deliver the message, he might throw his drink in her face and end it anyway. So Anna made a choice. She would translate the words, but she would also translate the truth behind them. She spoke in Japanese. "Mr. Blackwell has reached the end of his prepared remarks. He is afraid. He fears he has lost this opportunity, and like a cornered animal, he is attempting to threaten you. He speaks of another investor. It is a lie. He is a man of low character and no patience. He is demanding you sign a letter of intent tonight, or he will move on. She paused, then added in her own words, "He believes you are a fool, Mr. Takahashi. He believes you are just like him, and that this show of disrespect is a sign of strength." The room was utterly still. Blackwell Harrington and Jensen watched Mr. Takahashi's face, searching for a reaction. Mr. Takahashi was silent for a full minute. His face was a mask of stone. Anna could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. Had she gone too far? Had she just misread the entire situation and destroyed everything? Finally, Mr. Takahashi spoke. It was one short sentence. Anna turned to Blackwell. "Mr. Takahashi," she said, "would like another bottle of water, and he would like to see the dessert menu. He says he is in no hurry at all." The bluff had been called. Blackwell didn't just lose the hand. Mr. Takahashi had just set his cards on fire. Blackwell slumped back in his chair, a defeated, broken man. The power vacuum was filled. The negotiation, such as it was over. But the conversation was just beginning. The tension in the room broke, replaced by a strange, surreal calm. Mark Jensen, the junior analyst, nearly wept with relief. Tom Harrington began looking at his phone, likely updating his resume. Richard Blackwell just stared into his empty Scotch glass, the fight gone out of him. Charles, the manager, materialized with a bottle of sparkling water, which he presented to Anna as if she were the guest of honor. She poured a glass for Mr. Takahashi, her hands miraculously steady. For a few minutes, there was only the sound of water being poured, and the quiet click of Mr. Takahashi scanning the dessert menu. He ordered a green tea panna cotta. Then he set the menu aside and looked at Anna. The previous hardness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a sharp, academic curiosity. He began to speak to her, his tone conversational, almost gentle. Blackwell, desperate to be included, muttered, "What's he saying now, is he accepting the deal?" Anna held up a hand to silence him, a gesture of command that Blackwell stunningly obeyed. "He is no longer discussing the fabrication plant, Mr. Blackwell." Anna said, her eyes on Takahashi. "He is asking about me." He wants to know where a waitress at the Cypress Room learned to speak such formal boardroom-level Japanese. He notes that my accent is from the Kansai region, specifically Kyoto. Anna's throat tightened. The ghost she had kept locked away for a decade was now floating in the center of the room, summoned by this polite, quiet man. "Tell him," Anna said, her voice strained, "that I lived there as a child. My father was in business in Kyoto." She kept her answer short, translating it for him. Mr. Takahashi listened, his head tilted. He asked another question. Anna's breath hitched. "What?" Blackwell demanded. He is asking for my family name," Anna whispered. "He's asking for my father's name." "Why, what's it matter?" "In his culture it matters. It's context. It's everything." She turned back to Mr. Takahashi. She told him her name. "My name is Anna Riley. My father is Robert Riley." The reaction was instantaneous and shocking. Mr. Takahashi's eyes widened. He sat bolt upright, his placid demeanor shattering like thin ice. He leaned forward, speaking rapidly, his voice no longer calm, but filled with a sudden, urgent energy. Anna listened, her own face draining of color. She felt lightheaded. The words he was saying, they were impossible. "What is it?" Blackwell said, his voice rising in panic. "What's going on?" "Does he know you?" Anna couldn't speak. She just stared at the Japanese millionaire. "Anna, talk to me," Blackwell shouted. He knows my father," Anna said, her voice trembling. He recognizes the name. Robert Riley. From Kyoto Nexus. The air in the room became thin electric. "Kyoto Nexus," Tom Harrington piped up. "The conglomerate, they're legends. They're ruthless." "Yes," Anna said, her gaze distant. "They are." Mr. Takahashi spoke again, his voice softer now, his eyes filled with a strange, profound sadness. Anna translated her voice barely a whisper, as if she were narrating a dream. He says he was a junior executive at Kyoto Nexus, in the Green Tech Acquisitions Division. He remembers my father's project. He says it was visionary. He says it was beautiful." She paused, swallowing hard. "He says he was in the meeting. The last meeting." The room was tomb silent. Anna was no longer in the Cypress room. She was 14 again, standing on a polished granite floor outside a boardroom, waiting for her father's life to end. "He says," Anna continued, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall, "that he was the one who found the loophole, the clause in the contract." Blackwell let out a sharp, astonished breath. "It was his job," Anna translated, her voice mechanical. "He was ordered to find a vulnerability, and he did. But," he says, "he also filed a formal protest. He told his superiors that the action was dishonorable, that it was bad business, that stealing my father's work would bring a dark shadow on the company. He argued that a partnership would be 100 times more profitable in the long run than a simple theft." Mr. Takahashi looked down at his folded hands. He spoke one last time, his voice heavy with the weight of 20 years. Anna translated, "They overruled him. They called his protest naive. They called him naive. They said he didn't understand Western business. They promoted the man who pushed the hostile acquisition through." Mr. Takahashi says he tendered his resignation the next day. He could not work for men with no honor. He says he built his own company. Takahashi Innovative, on a single principle: never ever sign a deal with a man you would not be proud to call your friend. He looked up first at Blackwell with an expression of pure, cold dismissal, and then he looked at Anna Riley. He says he has carried the shadow of Robert Riley with him his entire career, as a reminder of what not to become. The revelation hung in the air, dense and heavy. Richard Blackwell, a man who had entered the dinner as a titan of industry, had been reduced to a spectator at someone else's life-altering drama. He saw the deal, his $300 million prize, sailing away on a ship he couldn't even see. "So," Blackwell said, his voice a hoarse croak, "you're telling me this whole thing, this dinner, it's all because your father, got screwed over in Japan. He was trying to find an angle a way back in. Well, that's terrible. A tragedy. But what does it have to do with us? With this?" Mr. Takahashi looked at Blackwell and spoke in short, sharp Japanese. Anna, her composure slowly returning, her shock being replaced by a cold, crystalline anger translated. "He says it has everything to do with this. He says he came to this dinner to see if you, Mr. Blackwell, were a man like his former bosses at Kyoto Nexus, or if you were a man like my father." Blackwell swallowed. "And," he says, Anna continued, her voice devoid of emotion, "that you are worse than his former bosses. He says at least they were polite while they were robbing my father. You couldn't even manage that." The words landed like a physical blow. Tom Harrington actually winced. Mark Jensen looked like he was studying the carpet for a place to hide. "Now wait just a minute," Blackwell sputtered, rising from his chair. You Waitress, you've been poisoning him against me. You've been twisting my words. This is sabotage." "I translated your words when I was generous, Mr. Blackwell," Anna said, standing up to face him. Her voice didn't rise. It dropped, gaining a new and terrible weight. "Just before I translated your intent, and at the end I translated the truth. At no point did I have to lie. Your character, sir, is a universal language." You're fired," he roared, pointing a shaking finger at her. "Charles, get in here! Get her out!" The door opened. But it wasn't Charles. It was Mr. Takahashi's own personal assistant, a severe-looking woman who had apparently just arrived from the airport. She had been waiting outside. She rushed to Mr. Takahashi's side, bowing and apologizing profusely in Japanese. Mr. Takahashi silenced her with a raised hand. He spoke to her, but he never took his eyes off Anna. The assistant listened, her own eyes widening in surprise. She nodded, then turned and left the room. "What now?" Blackwell demanded. "Is he leaving?" "Yes," Anna said. "He is." Mr. Takahashi stood. He buttoned his suit jacket. He walked around the table not to Blackwell, but to Anna. He stopped in front of her. He spoke to her in Japanese, his voice full of respect. He was, she realized, apologizing to her. Apologizing for what his country, his business world had done to her family. And then he made a statement. A declaration. Blackwell, desperate, clawed for one last chance. "What did he say, Anna?" "What did he say?" "Tell him. Tell him we can renegotiate. We can offer 60, 40, 70, 30. Tell him." Anna looked at the pathetic red-faced man who had an hour ago held her financial future in his hands. Then she looked at the quiet, powerful man who had just validated her father's entire life. She turned to Blackwell. "Mr. Takahashi says, there is no deal, Mr. Blackwell. Not with you. He says he cannot in good conscience partner his company with a man of weak foundation and loud voice. He says you mistake arrogance for strength, and he pities you." "Pities me," Blackwell whispered, collapsing back into his chair as if his strings had been cut. "And," Anna continued, "he has instructed his assistant to cancel his return flight to Tokyo. He will be staying in the city for another week." "Why?" Tom Harrington asked, his voice a squeak. A small, genuine smile finally touched Anna's lips. "He is going to open his fabrication plant, but not with Blackwell Industries. He is going to do it himself. He says he needs someone to run his new U.S. venture. Someone who understands both American passion and Japanese spirit. Someone who can act as a bridge. Someone he can trust." She paused, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "He has just offered me the position of President of U.S. Operations. He says he wishes to finally repay the debt owed to the Riley family name." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a world ending and a new one beginning. Richard Blackwell looked at Anna. He saw for the first time not a servant. He saw the woman who had just dismantled his entire future with a language he was too ignorant to understand. He saw a person who had been in the room all along, whom he had dismissed as furniture, and who had just walked away with his $300 million prize. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was, for the first time in his life, utterly and completely defeated. Tom Harrington and Mark Jensen were already gathering their briefcases, their expressions carefully blank. They were survivors. They were already mentally distancing themselves from Blackwell, crafting their own versions of the story, where they had been uncomfortable with his behavior from the start. Mr. Takahashi nodded once to Anna. It was a gesture of profound respect. He then turned, and without a single glance at the other men, walked out of the private dining room. His assistant waiting in the hall bowed to him, and they walked away. Anna was left alone with the wreckage. She stood there for a long moment, the adrenaline fading, leaving her shaking. President of U.S. operations. It wasn't just a job. It was a restoration. It was a vindication. It was the moment her father, now a quiet IT tech in a small college, would finally be able to hold his head high again. Blackwell was still sitting staring. "Anna," he said, his voice a dry rasp. I can match it. Whatever he's offering. I'll double it. Director of whatever you want. Just get him back." Anna looked at him. She felt no anger, no triumph, only a vast, empty pity. "You still don't understand. Do you, Mr. Blackwell?" she said, her voice her own again. "It was never about the money." She turned to the service station in the corner, her corner where she had stood just an hour before, worrying about her rent. She saw her reflection in the dark glass of the wine cooler. She was still wearing the apron. Slowly, deliberately, she reached behind her back and untied the strings. She folded the black apron, the symbol of her invisibility, the uniform of her struggle, and placed it neatly on the mahogany table. She placed it right on top of Blackwell's discarded multi-million-dollar proposal. She did not run. She did not storm out. She walked. She walked out of the private dining room. She walked past Charles, the manager, who was standing in the hallway, his face a mask of pale, terrified confusion. Miss Riley," he stammered. Is everything all right?" "Everything," Anna said, "is perfect." She walked through the main dining room, past the tables of the city's elite, the men and women who any other night she would be serving. They didn't look at her. She was once again invisible. But she didn't care. They would know her name soon enough. She pushed open the heavy glass doors of the Cypress Room and stepped out into the cool night air. The city skyline glittered in front of her, no longer a jewelry box, spilled for others, but a kingdom waiting for its new queen. She took a deep breath, tasting the air of her new life. She had entered the restaurant a waitress invisible and in debt. She was leaving it a president. And she was for the first time in a decade completely and totally free. Anna didn't take a cab. The idea of enclosing herself in a small moving box felt wrong, almost suffocating. She needed air. She needed the pavement under her feet, a solid grounding connection to the earth which had just fundamentally shifted beneath her. She walked. The October air was sharp and cold, biting at her cheeks and sinking through the thin material of her work uniform. Any other night she would have been shivering, pulling her flimsy jacket tight, her mind fixated on the long, cold wait at the bus stop. Tonight, she didn't even feel the cold. A white-hot energy was thrumming just beneath her skin, a current so powerful it felt like it was lighting her up from the inside. She walked past the gleaming cathedral-like lobbies of banks and consulting firms. She saw the reflections of late-night cleaning crews, invisible people in grey uniforms polishing the brass and glass of a world that wasn't theirs. She had been one of them. An hour ago, she was one of them. She saw her own reflection in the dark window of a closed designer boutique. A woman in simple black trousers and a white button-down shirt, her hair pulled back in a severe functional bun. She looked, she thought, exactly the same. But the woman staring back at her didn't have the eyes of a waitress. The exhaustion was still there, but beneath it was a new and terrible clarity. The look of a person who had just seen the raw inner workings of the world, the smallness of powerful men, the random, beautiful justice of a 20-year-old echo, and had chosen to step into the machine herself. Her 2008 sedan was in the employee garage 5 blocks back. The one with the failing transmission, the one whose click-click-click sound had been the soundtrack to her anxieties for a month. The thought of that car, of the repair bill she had been dreading, struck her as so absurd, so completely alien, that she almost laughed out loud. It was a problem from another life, a problem for a person who no longer existed. She found herself without any conscious direction in a small city park, a quiet square of darkness pressed between glittering high-rises, the very buildings she had dreamed of living in. She had come here before on her worst nights, after a 14-hour shift, after a customer had been particularly cruel, after a rent check had bounced. She would sit on a bench, look up at the penthouses, those silent, glowing rectangles of light in the sky, and feel the crushing, impossible distance. Tonight, she sat on that same bench. She looked up at the same penthouses. They no longer looked distant. They just looked badly lit. She pulled her phone from her apron pocket. No, she'd left the apron. It was in her slacks pocket. Her hand was shaking, not from fear, from potential, the sheer terrifying weight of it. She had one call to make. Her finger hovered over the contact labeled Dad. It was past midnight. He would be asleep. This call would shatter his sleep, send a jolt of pure panic through him. In the Riley household, a phone call after midnight meant only one thing: disaster. A car crash, a hospital, a firing. She pressed the screen. It rang 3 times, 3 piercing sounds in the quiet park. "Hello, Anna." His voice was a thick, worried mumble. "Is everything okay, honey? It's almost 1 in the morning." "Hi, Dad," she said, and the word, that simple, familiar word, broke the dam. The adrenaline, the shock, the surreal, terrifying joy of the last 3 hours crashed over her. A sob she hadn't even known was there tore itself from her throat. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of release, the sound of a spring coiled tight for a decade. Finally snapping. "Anna, baby, what's wrong?" His voice was instantly terribly awake. Pure paternal panic. "Are you hurt? Did you get fired? Tell me where you are." He went straight to fired. Of course he did. In his world, a world defined by the quiet trauma of that Kyoto boardroom. A confrontation at work for someone like them, someone not in charge, always ended in dismissal. "Yes." She laughed, the sob catching in her throat. "Yes, I got fired, Dad." "Oh, honey. It's okay. It's just a job. You can start looking tomorrow. We'll be fine." His voice was full of that familiar, gentle resignation, the voice of a man expertly managing his disappointment. "No, Dad. You're not hearing me." She wiped her face with her sleeve, taking a deep, ragged breath of the cold air. I got fired, but I also got a new job. Tonight, like, just now." A confused silence. "A new job? What, at another restaurant?" "Did Charles recommend you?" "That's great, honey. But..." The smallness of his hope, the limited scope of what he believed was possible for her, broke her heart. "No, Dad. Not a restaurant." She had to do this right. She had to build the new reality for him piece by piece. "Dad," she said, her voice steadying, gaining the same calm, measured tone she had used with Takahashi. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. This is going to sound like a dream. But it's not. It's real. How much do you remember about a man named Takahashi from Kyoto Nexus?" The silence on the other end of the line was not confusion. It was absolute. It was the sound of a ghost walking into the room. She could picture her father, sitting up in bed, his face pale. "Dad, are you there?" When he spoke, his voice was a different instrument. The sleepy, anxious father was gone. In his place was a voice she hadn't heard in 20 years. The voice of Robert Riley, the visionary. Sharp, precise, and vibrating with a long-buried pain. "Takahashi. Satoshi Takahashi." He said the name as if it were a prayer and a curse. He was a junior executive, young, idealistic, brilliant. He was the only one who stood up for me. The only one. He argued with them. He told them it was dishonorable. He said my work was important. They laughed at him, called him naive. "Yes," Anna whispered. "He resigned." Her father continued, his voice a rasp. "He tendered his resignation in protest. I never heard from him again. I assumed he'd been blackballed, that his career was over." He paused, his breath catching. "Anna, why are you saying that name?" "Because he wasn't blackballed, Dad. He built his own company, a massive one, and tonight he was at my restaurant." "What?" "He was the guest, the Japanese millionaire. The translator never showed up, and the men he was meeting with, they were awful, Dad. They were arrogant and dismissive. They were just like them. The men in that room. They mocked him because they thought he couldn't understand." "But you could," her father breathed, the final puzzle piece clicking into place. "Oh, Anna, you spoke." "I spoke," she confirmed, a cold smile touching her lips. "I translated. And then we talked. He asked my name. He asked for your name. Dad, he remembers everything. He remembers the project. He remembers the meeting. He remembers you. He remembers. He has been living with the shadow of what they did to you for 20 years, Dad. He said it was the single event that defined his entire business philosophy." She stood up from the bench, too full of energy to sit. She began to pace the small park. "He's opening his US headquarters here, Dad, in this city. But not with Blackwell. He tore up the deal. He's doing it himself, and he offered me a job." "A job?" Her father repeated, his voice numb. "He wants me to run it. He called me President of US Operations." The sound that came through the phone was a sharp, ragged gasp, the sound of a man being punched in the gut and given CPR at the same time. It was the sound of a weight heavier than a mountain lifting. He said, Anna's own voice was thick with tears now. He said he wanted to repay a debt. He said he wanted to honor the Riley family name. She listened as her father, the quiet IT tech who reset passwords and flinched at loud noises, wept. He wept openly, without shame or reservation, for a full minute. The sound of 2 decades of quiet failure, of internalized shame of a life, lived in the minor key, all of it washing away. He said that, Robert finally choked out. He used that word, honor. He called your work visionary, Dad, Anna said softly. He called it beautiful. She let him have the moment. She listened to him breathe, listened to him recalibrate his entire life. Then the new part of her, the president, the partner, clicked into place. Dad? She said, her voice shifting, losing its tremor and gaining a new clean edge of command. Dad, listen to me. Where are they? Where are what? Honey, the notebooks, the green tech project, the logistics algorithms, all the work from Kyoto. Where is it? Oh, I don't know, in the attic, in boxes, tucked away. Anna, that was. God, that was 20 years ago. That tech is ancient. It's useless. Is it? Anna said, her voice sharp and alive. The principles aren't. The philosophy isn't. You were 2 decades ahead of your time. Everyone is just now catching up to what you were doing. They call it ESG. They call it sustainable logistics. You wrote the playbook. Anna, I'm just an IT tech. You were. She corrected him, her voice iron but gentle. You're Robert Riley. You're a visionary. And I need you to go up into that attic, find those boxes, and start reading. And then I need you to start writing down every new idea you've had since, every improvement, every what if. Because I have a feeling, I have a very strong feeling, that my new boss, Mr. Takahashi, my new partner, is going to be extremely interested in funding a new research and development division, headed by the man who started it all. There was a new silence, a silence not of shock, but of dawning, terrifying, glorious possibility. Anna, he whispered, is this real? It's real, Dad, she said, smiling up at the penthouse lights. They didn't look like an impossible dream anymore. They just looked like future office space. Get some sleep. We have a lot of work to do. She ended the call and stood for a long moment, the phone in her hand. The city hummed around her. She had 1,000 things to do. She needed to find a tailor. She needed to look at high-rise apartments. She needed to... She laughed. She needed to buy a new car. She would walk into a dealership tomorrow morning and buy whatever she wanted. No more clicking sounds, no more anxieties. She slid the phone into her pocket and began to walk. She wasn't Anna the waitress. She wasn't even not yet Anna Riley, president. As she walked under the amber streetlights through the sleeping city that was now finally hers, she was just Anna. The ghost was gone. The shadow had been lifted. And she was, for the first time in her adult life, completely, incandescently, and powerfully whole. That night in the Cypress Room, it wasn't just a business deal that was translated. It was honor. It was history. It was redemption. Anna Riley walked in carrying a tray, but she walked out carrying the future of 2 families. This story is a powerful reminder that the person you overlook, the person you dismiss, might just be the only one in the room who understands what's really being said. Our past, our skills, even our scars can become our greatest strengths when we have the courage to finally use them. What did you think of Anna's story? Did you predict the incredible twist about her father? Let me know your favorite part in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more true life stories, just like this one. Your support means the world. Thanks for listening.